Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. This is Dr. Guthrie. It's a pleasure to be back. We had a week hiatus. We had to do other things. And it's a pleasure to be back. This is going to be a fun lesson on Psalms. Psalms is not the kind of material where you can dig deeply into it intellectually or historically or anything. And we're going to cover that. And then because of the Christmas season that's coming, and Christmas this year and New Year's are both on Saturdays, we're going to take 2 other weeks off, and we'll be resuming in early January. I'm certain you all can suffice without this for a couple weeks, even though I'll miss it. But we have to celebrate the holidays appropriately. Now that was the 100th Psalm, my favorite, from the King James, because there's a little and a lot to discuss about Psalms. One is it's probably the most important place in the Old Testament where the translation makes a huge difference, because the Jerusalem Bible, which is what I traditionally use, that's a King James, of course. That's my grandmother's old King James. The Jerusalem Bible, which is what I use now, acclaim Yahweh, all the earth. Serve Yahweh with gladness. Come into his presence with songs of joy. Be sure that Yahweh is God. He made us. We belong to him, his people, the flock of his sheepfold. Come within his gates, giving thanks, to his courts singing praise. Give thanks to him and bless his name, for Yahweh is good. His faithful love is everlasting, his constancy from age to age. Now, when we did this in a live class, I really didn't lecture much. I told people to bring their favorite Psalms, and we'll read them. And I read my favorite, which is the 100th. And we just discussed them. So I'm going to do a relatively lighter approach to this, historically, etc. And we'll have a little fun. And this is a very enjoyable way. But this is one place in the Old Testament where the translation is very much an art form. Translation of the Bible is an art form, period. You're translating these very ancient texts. The Greek texts are from the 1st century. For the New Testament, the Hebrew texts are from about 1100, 1000 AD. So the texts are over thousands of years old. You got to translate them into modern language, and it's very much an art form. And when you do the poetry of the Psalms, you'll see how the art form interpretation is different. Because everybody interprets art form their own way. And I'm not a translator or skilled at this, but I enjoy this. The Psalms include 150 or so individual units, and how you arrange them is up to you. I'll explain how they categorize them. Their history is unclear, and Proverbs is pretty much the same way. I'm not going to cover Proverbs individually, but what I'm saying about the historical way is probably true for Proverbs also. The history is unclear. Nobody knows when these things were started. Nobody knows who authored these. Nobody knows exactly how they were performed in probably the temple ceremonies or individual worship or whatever. Nobody knows any of these things. There is no historical information in here, except that some are regarded as Psalms of David. I think the reason that you don't have any history is it's really undefinable. Some of these may go way, way back. And, David is about 1000 AD. About 70 Psalms are attributed to David. I bet he did some of them, whether it was all 70 or not. That's a lot. And it was a matter of tribute. If you'd gotten to know the Psalm together and David had recently died or was 102 years in the grave, you would attribute it to him. It gives more credit to the Psalm, and it's more credit to him. So you just don't know. He did some of them, I'm certain, but he probably didn't do all the ones that are attributed to him. That we don't know how they were composed musically. We don't know if there any evidence of what tunes there were. You just don't know. They don't have any way of writing down music in the old days. And they were probably used heavily in temple worship. And remember that temple worship evolved dramatically over the time that these things were created. That the first temple comes from time of Solomon. It's destroyed in the Babylonian exile 600 years later. You got a second temple built and opened in 515 BC. It's destroyed in 70 AD. So you got these long stretches where the temple was in existence, and these things may have been put together. They were probably used as part of the temple ceremonies. There were three major festivals: unleavened bread or Passover in the spring, a harvest festival in late May or early June, and then the end of year, which is now Rosh Hashanah, in the fall. And these major festivals, they were probably used then. But nobody really knows any of this. So it's a very important thing that we just approach it in a way of enjoying it. What kind of musical instruments did they have? Well, from the historical records at the time, not of this area, but of pictures that we've seen from the Babylonians, Egyptians, there were several musical instruments, and one of them is the lyre, which is kind of like a harp, a handheld harp, small handheld harp, like an auto harp. One is a primitive flute, which is simply a hollowed out wood or reed thing with holes in it, and you play it, which I could never do in music class in elementary school back in West Virginia. I was never any good at this. And then you had some various percussion instruments, castanets maybe, drums clearly, and did you have any? And then the lute was a primitive guitar type instrument with a rounded bottom, and you would pluck the strings. Exactly which of these they used, we have no idea. Sometimes there's a mention of this and that, but you just don't know. So it's a case of, read it, enjoy it, and we'll try not to be as intellectual as we usually are. My guess is, and there's a lot of guessing here, okay, is that the beginning of the Psalms probably began to be put together or memorized around the campfire when they began to settle the Holy Land. It's just 1200, 1300 BC. We don't really know exactly. They probably got more and more formulated as the tribal confederacy came together or gave up and became a monarchy. These are the kind of luxuries you can have with the royal family, and they became integral in the worship ceremonies. But so it's probably really getting going during the time of King David, and then you go on forward really up until the Christian era. Like I said about King David, he's attributed about 70 of them. Did all of them go back to him? I don't think so, but I certainly don't know that. But I think he did some of them. He was a multi-talented person. Very, very interesting. And they're arranged in 5 books. Books 1 and 2 are attributed to David, and the ones that are attributed to David stop after book 2. Book 1 is Psalms 1 through 41, and book 2 is Psalms 42 to 72, and that's the end of those who are accredited to David. Book 3 is 73 to 89. Remember, there's 150. Book 4 is 90 to 106. Book 5 is 107 to 150. Who compiled the books? I give up. When were they compiled? Most likely during the Second Temple period, after they came back from Babylonian exile. Remember, they were putting their other texts together while they were in exile, and you began to get the written text, you began to get the prophetic text organized. You had Second Isaiah, you had a variety of other prophets. It was all organized. Probably in that time frame, they began to organize. Do I think they continued to add to them over the centuries? Sure. If you look at our history of our hymnal, how many hymnal revisions have I been through in my 30 years as a Methodist? At least 2. Will we continue to have hymnal revisions over the time? Sure. Hymns in our current hymns fall out of favor, fall into favor. And so, these things can continue to change. Now, how are these categorized? Well, if you took 15 scholars of the Old Testament, you would get 15 different ways. So is there a right way and a wrong way? Not in my opinion. Am I claiming any particular knowledge in this? No. I have read a couple of the people, and I'm going to quote their claims. But is that important? No. But you have to look at some of these and the impact that they've had. Several of our current hymns, "Lift Up Your Heads, O Ye Gates," that's just Psalm 24. Come right from the Psalms, and they put to modern music. So the one author categorizes them by function. Okay, hymns that are the celebration of majesty of God. That's like the 100th. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all you lands. And so that's one group. Songs that are laments, like the 22nd Psalm. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Which is what Jesus was quoting on the cross. And that recognition of human-based problems. Our problems are not created by God. Our problems are created by us. Let's be very clear here. We're a pretty flawed species. And God can save us from ourselves at times, but often He let us struggle along. Maybe we'll learn something and begin to do better. So these are human-based problems, and you're petitioning God to intervene, to rescue you from your own self. I pray for that all the time. Forgive my sins and protect me from my foolishness. You have thanksgiving songs, which are expressions of gratitude for divine assistance. We have them in our modern thing. We gather to the old pilgrim hymn. We gather together to ask the Lord blessing. The other one, which is one of my other favorites, is "Come ye thankful people, come, raise the song of harvest home." Very similar to what they have. So this is a part of the religious culture that transcends thousands and thousands of years and carries on. Then you have praise hymns, which are like the 100th, where you're praising God in His mighty majesty. Let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself here. You had thanksgiving hymns. That's the other classification. So that's one where they had the three classifications, where you had the hymns of celebrating the majesty of God, the hymns of lament, like the 22nd, and the hymns of thanksgiving, which is express gratitude to God for saving us from ourselves and for all the blessings that we have. A second way of looking at them are as this is about 10 categories in this one. One are the praise hymns. So the best example, of course, is "Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all you lands." That's the 100th Psalm. And those includes 1, 33, 66, 100, 109, etc., and a bunch of others. Enthronement hymns, which celebrate God's majesty sitting on His own throne, because the Hebrew understanding of God was different from the competing fertility and nature gods of the time. The nature gods were considered trapped in the cycles of nature. They'd have to go to the underworld at the time of winter and fight their way back up, and they were victims of the nature cycles. It's never been part of the Yahweh faith to think that God is trapped in the nature cycles. God is in control of the nature cycles, and so we need to worship it. So it was a very different religion, even from the very beginning. And that includes ones like 29, 47, 95, 96, 97, etc. Songs of Zion. Now, Zion is the holy city, so there are certain songs that praise Jerusalem, Zion, as the holy city, and they sing the glories of the holy city. That's 46, 48, 76, and a couple others. Songs of lament. These are saying, it's not saying you've punished me. It's the circumstances are terrible. I've made a mess out of them. I've made a mess out of my life. Please save me from myself. There's a whole bunch of those. 3, 12, 13, 22. That's my God, why hast thou forsaken me? 31, 34, 52. I won't give you all the numbers because I know you're not writing them down. And the songs of trust in the divine Redeemer, that God will save us from ourselves. The most obvious of this is 23rd Psalm, which is what everybody's favorite. My favorite is, and I think 23rd Psalm is a wonderful song. My favorite is the 100th. And But that's a good category. And there are also others, 11, 16, 23, we said 27, 62, and 63. There are sacred history songs in which God is described as the deliverer because he delivered them from bondage, he delivered them from Sinai, he delivered them from the Babylonians, and has restored them to their semi-independent kingdom of the Persians. And that is 78, 105, 106, 135. There are royal psalms which focus on the reigning monarch, not God. There's not too many of those, but they would have clearly have come most likely from from the southern kingdom of Judah, where the kings were worth praising. Because remember, in the northern kingdom, they'd last 7-8 days sometimes as king. And they were celebrating the monarchy. There are songs of thanksgiving. We have songs of thanksgiving now, 30, 34, 67, etc. They are wisdom songs, which are difficult to define, and they're trying to explain the challenge of wisdom, which is emerging at this time. Why do you have good and why do you have bad? Why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? Why isn't it much more categorized that way? And this is what we're getting into the wisdom literature right now. It struggles with in Ecclesiastes and Job and Daniel and a few other books like that. So it's a very interesting challenge that never goes away, because you see that now, why bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. And that's first, 37th, 49th, 73rd, etc. Then there are some liturgical ones for worship. 24, that has the Lift Up Your Heads, O Ye Gates, which is now in one of our modern songs. And finally, the issue you need to make, which is very challenging, is how do you translate these things? They're written in poetry. How do you translate poetry? I mean, even translating modern poetry or translating other ancient poetry, translating Homer, which is written in its own version of poetry, and the Iliad and the Odyssey, that's a challenge too. And so you do find, and it's a good example, which I'm going to read you again, is the differences on the 100th Psalm. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. And Jerusalem says, I'll read the whole thing and then come back. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name, for the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. Now, that's the King James. I don't use the King James Version except when we do Psalms. This is my grandmother's old Bible, actually, very old. But if you do the Jerusalem, which is about 20 years ago, and Jerusalem tried to do a more poetic translation. Acclaim Yahweh, all the earth. Serve Yahweh with gladness. Come into his presence with songs of joy. Not quite as rhythmic and poetic, but they're trying to do an accurate translation. I would suspect that the King James people were trying more to have it smooth and poetic than clearly, because what do these words mean a long time ago? Be sure that Yahweh is God. He made us. We belong to him. His people, the flock of his sheepfold. Come within his gates, giving thanks, to his courts, singing praise. Give thanks to him and bless his name, for Yahweh is good. His faithful love is everlasting, his constancy from age to age. So, and there are a couple other tidbits that we are used to. The 22nd Psalm, my God, why have you forsaken me? The words of my groaning do nothing to save me. My God, I call by day, but you do not answer at night, and I find no respite. Yet you, the Holy One, who make your home in the praises of Israel, in you our ancestors put their trust. So it becomes a praise song in the end there. And then you do find in the 24th, lift up your heads, O ye gates, raise high. It's a modern hymn. So my point about Psalms is there really can't be scientific or intellectual or too accurate about it because you just can't tell. The history is unclear. There's no way to trace it. The songs have probably been updated linguistically from when they were in the very ancient kingdom and when they got recorded in the more modern times. So my point is enjoy it, enjoy them, understand that you can't pin it down, and feel free to use different translations to do this. But again, translating is an art form. So we're going to stop here. We do want to add one thing. I'm not really going to cover Proverbs because the same issues come with Proverbs. We don't really know who compiled it. We don't know when it was compiled. To some of the Proverbs, because it's in 3 sections of different type. First section is relatively short, pithy, one-liner, two-liners. Then you have more lengthy stories. And we're not really going to do it because did some of these go back to Solomon? Probably. Did he do all of the ones attributed? Of course not. And many of these are ones that have been adapted from the surrounding culture. That these kind of questions were always out there in the culture, and they adapted them and put these things in to guide your behavior. And probably weren't compiled until the Second Temple period after 515 BC, when they've been returned from exile and they were putting all their legends and things into written format. And that's probably during that time when Psalms was put into text, and probably the same with Proverbs. So I'm going to stop here. Like I said, the next 2 weeks we're going to have off. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy your New Year's. Be safe. Be careful. The reading for the next lesson, we're getting into the wisdom literature. And the wisdom literature tries to answer the question that we talked about, what bad things happen to good people, etc. And it will be Ecclesiastes, which is a great book, chapters 1 through 6. And Job, only chapters 1 and 2 and 38. And we'll see you in 3 weeks. Have a great Christmas. Have a safe and happy New Year. This is Dr. Guthrie.